All right, we're back with another video. So today I want to talk about the idea that suffering is worse than pleasure is good. And so a simple-ish way to break this down would be to imagine there's a scenario where in this scenario you're not able to give consent for the act that's going to be done, but in this scenario, say that you're in a life-threatening situation, and the way to save you from this would be to break your arm to then save you from the life-threatening situation. So in this instance, someone is going to inflict suffering upon you, but the result will be less greater suffering in the long run. Most people, I think, would agree that it is morally justifiable and okay, and would prefer that the person does inflict this lesser suffering of breaking your arm to save you from greater suffering. However, if you're in a situation where you don't consent to it, but someone is given the option to break your arm, and at the end of it, you're given X amount of dollars, I think that most people would agree it is less morally justifiable for them to do this and then say, well, look, now you get this as the reward for me breaking your arm. Maybe you would okay that depending on the dollar amount if you're able to consent to this, but the point is that in the non-consenting option, it seems worse to inflict suffering and reward that with pleasure than to inflict suffering to avoid more suffering. And so this kind of sets it up where the avoidance of suffering is more important and more desirable than the pursuit of pleasure, even if both avenues go through the base lesser suffering of breaking your arm, if that makes sense. So this is something that comes into account and you can factor into more in-depth moral and ethical conversations and questions. And it's also, broadly speaking, more sort of metaphysical, but just whether or not, it gets into where we place our values and whether or not suffering is worse than pleasure is good. And I do think that it follows that, generally speaking, suffering we do consider worse than the goodness that you get from pleasure. So yeah, just an interesting thing to think about. Let me know what you think down below if you agree that suffering is worse than pleasure is good. But yeah, that's it for me today. I will see you in the next one.